The cabin was quiet. The cockpit instruments were normal. But a deadly fire was already burning below their feet. ValuJet Flight 592 was a scheduled domestic passenger flight that crashed into the Florida Everglades on 11 May 1996, killing all 110 people on board. And it stands as one of the most tragic examples of how regulatory gaps, improper handling of hazardous materials, and inadequate safety oversight can combine to produce a catastrophe that no amount of piloting skill can overcome. The aircraft was a McDonnell Douglas DC-9 operated by ValuJet Airlines, a rapidly expanding low-cost carrier in the United States, flying from Miami to Atlanta with 105 passengers and 5 crew members. The flight departed Miami normally in the afternoon, and for the first several minutes everything appeared routine as the aircraft climbed away from the airport. Less than 10 minutes after takeoff, however, a fire erupted in the aircraft's forward cargo hold, directly beneath the passenger cabin. The source of the fire was later traced to improperly packaged chemical oxygen generators, which had been removed from other aircraft and shipped as company materials by a maintenance contractor. These generators, which produce intense heat when activated, were supposed to be empty and rendered safe, but many still contained live chemical cores and were not fitted with protective safety caps. During loading or taxiing, one or more of the generators likely activated, igniting surrounding materials and creating an intense, fast-spreading fire. Because the DC-9's cargo hold was not equipped with a fire detection or suppression system, the crew had no warning until the fire had already grown out of control. Smoke began to fill the cabin and cockpit, and the flight crew declared an emergency and attempted to return to Miami. As conditions deteriorated rapidly, the captain radioed air traffic control with the now infamous words, "Fire below the cabin," a chilling acknowledgement that the blaze was coming from a location they could not access or fight. The fire quickly compromised electrical wiring, control cables, and critical systems, leading to instrument failures and loss of control. Within minutes of the first signs of smoke, the aircraft became uncontrollable, rolled sharply, and crashed at high speed into the shallow waters of the Everglades, leaving no survivors. The crash site's swampy terrain made recovery extremely difficult, but investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board were eventually able to determine the cause with certainty. The investigation revealed a chain of failures extending far beyond the cockpit. The oxygen generators had been mislabeled as empty, packaged improperly, and transported without being recognized as hazardous materials, despite their known dangers. ValuJet's oversight of its maintenance contractors was found to be inadequate, and the Federal Aviation Administration was criticized for failing to properly monitor the airline during its rapid expansion. The DC-9's lack of cargo fire detection and suppression systems, while compliant with regulations at the time, was identified as a critical vulnerability that left the crew with no realistic chance once the fire began. The ValuJet 592 disaster triggered sweeping changes in aviation safety. Regulations governing the transport of hazardous materials by air were significantly tightened, oversight of airline maintenance and contractors was strengthened, and all passenger aircraft were eventually required to have fire detection and suppression systems in cargo compartments. The accident also led to major reforms in FAA surveillance practices, particularly for fast-growing airlines, and highlighted the dangers of cost-cutting when it compromises safety culture. ValuJet itself suffered severe reputational damage and was grounded for several months. It later rebranded as AirTran Airways, though the legacy of Flight 592 continued to define public perception. Today, ValuJet Flight 592 is studied as a textbook case of systemic failure, showing how accidents are often the result of multiple small decisions and oversights aligning in a deadly way. The phrase, "fire below the cabin," endures as a stark reminder of the terror faced by the crew and passengers, and of the importance of rigorous safety standards, proper handling of dangerous materials, and constant vigilance in an industry where there is no margin for complacency.